2023 has been an incredible year for all things related to chips and AI. It's felt like every single week there's been major new announcements on AI, whether that's the software side with things like ChatGPT, Microsoft's Copilots.
On the hardware side, we have NVIDIA's GPUs, accelerators, and all of their competition. And on the stock market side, obviously an insane rally across all tech stocks from the Magnificent Seven all the way down to smaller growth stocks in the AI software and hardware space. So we figured we would put together an episode to just sit back, digest everything that's happened over the year, talk about our favorite moments and what they might mean for our money and our investments going forward. Your time is valuable, so let's get right into it.
All right. Item number one is we have to start with your jumper. So that I think you've 10 out of 10 for effort on the jumper there.
I don't know if people can see this, but it's actually a NASA ugly Christmas sweater. And these are rockets right here. So, next year my plan is to get the same one, but SpaceX. And for everyone across the pond, thank you. It's a wonderful jumper.
So yeah, you've done well. It's incredible to think it was just 12 months ago that it was announced, right? It was November 2022 that ChatGPT first hit the market. And I mean, this year there's been such a fast pace of everything. We had new models coming out, GPT-4, GPT-4 Turbo. They were in March and then November. We've had plugins that were being released. We've had an app store that was also released, where you can create your own custom GPT agents. The software was moving at such a fast pace. And at the same time, we had the chaos around Sam Altman being fired. First, he had been fired by the board. Then the next thing you knew, he was joining Microsoft. Then it was that the board was being fired and replaced and he was coming back. So much has gone on. It feels like we need time to try and digest all of that. So where would you say we are at the end of 2023? When the dust settles, like where is the state of OpenAI as a company? Like, how do you see it?
So this was like the moment that I picked that I thought we need to really reflect on, because OpenAI did a few really important things for the entire market. I don't think we've ever seen an organization ship products, releases, upgrades, updates anywhere near as fast as OpenAI with ChatGPT and DALL-E. And I think what's going to happen next year and in the future out of that is we'll see other software companies and other AI companies lower some of the boundaries and ship faster, right?
So to underline your point about the speed of shipping, it felt like after their first announcements at the start of the year, there were other companies that were built off the back of ChatGPT that were leveraging it. And by the time Dev Day came out, some of what they released basically killed those companies off. So it was almost like if you don't innovate and really quickly, you're going to be dead because they're going to have innovated so much faster than you.
I think you're right that especially in the beginning, companies that got built on top of ChatGPT, basically wrappers with fancy prompt engineering going on in the background, they died off pretty quick as ChatGPT got better at understanding prompts, as prompt engineering got democratized and even commoditized. So I think we're getting to a point now in large language models where you can pretty much rely on not going out of business tomorrow if you start your business today, right? We're seeing Google now, which we'll talk about a little later, with Gemini and Anthropic with Claude and all these other models. Now they realize, hey, we actually have to keep up a pretty aggressive cadence of how much these models can do, what new features we add on top of the UI, UX, all of the different things we allow customers to do with our models, not just the models themselves. We need to ship fast because our competitors are shipping fast and the state of the art is constantly moving. We're going to talk about this later too, but NVIDIA's chips are also moving to a faster cadence. So what used to take 2 years between the A100 and the H100 GPUs is now just a 6-month cycle, the H200s, then the Blackwells, and so on, right? So my point about speed is the industry, the actual AI software and hardware industry, huge industry, multiple sub-industries to that, is actually going to be moving faster, right? So now that means being 6 months behind on something is very different than what that used to mean a couple years ago. Just like, holy crap, OpenAI moves fast, which just shows that companies can move that fast, right? Even when they have big, stable, slow, monolithic partners like Microsoft, for example, Microsoft you would expect to be something that weighs you down. And Satya Nadella has shown us just the opposite, that he's willing to partner with people who want to move aggressively fast and build that speed into their own products, in this case, in the form of AI copilots, right?
And it's nice that you talked about Satya and that model, because I think somewhere in the mess of those days between Sam being fired and coming back, there was a time when everyone was going to join Microsoft. I remember Satya saying specifically, we will run that as an incubator. We'll run it as a company within our company, and we have a proven track record of doing that without killing the innovation. And I think what he was talking about there is exactly what you were saying, which is how do you bring a company like OpenAI into your organization, but not slow it down with the red tape, allow it to still run at the speed it needs to dominate. So I think he, even for the few minutes where he was thinking of absorbing it as a company, was also keen to allow the pace of innovation to stay, because that's one of their key kind of, silver bullets, or one of their key differentiators, is that pace.
Yeah. And I think is going to push a lot of other, even gigantic companies to realize, hey, we have to move fast. Another great example of that is Google. So Google is probably one of the biggest examples of a company that has the innovator's dilemma. They have a monopoly on search, but here they are finally acknowledging, okay, this model may not work in 10 years, 10 blue links. We need to be at the forefront of its disruption with things like Gemini, Bard, or else somebody else will. And now they are also moving fast. And that's, I think, only going to be even more exacerbated in 2024, because now that Sam Altman's back in OpenAI, they can probably move faster because the board isn't a speed bump on the way to new deployments, new developments.
It sounds like what you're saying is everything's really bullish on Microsoft, like continuing this leadership into the next year. Like, what do you see on that front? Do you think Google can catch up? I mean, Google is the AI company. It's really weird to see them playing like second fiddle or coming second to Microsoft at the moment.
I think that in general, things will move faster because OpenAI, Sam Altman, and Satya Nadella showed that at any scale, from OpenAI's 770 employees to Microsoft's 7 gajillion employees, are able to make important decisions quickly, both in terms of deploying software and in terms of governance and company structure. That's it. That's like the entire spectrum of size of companies and the entire spectrum of big decisions you need to make, both in terms of product and in terms of company. Things will get faster. And that's bad for people who can't move fast and great for companies that can. And I think what we're going to see is a big reward for innovators that are willing to make decisions fast. Now let's talk about whether Google can move fast enough to catch up to OpenAI and Microsoft, right? I think the answer is yes. I think they'll be able to close the gap. It's unfortunate that the Gemini demo is plagued by like the setup of the one blue duck test, because if you actually read the blog post for that demo, Google Gemini has really good benchmarks versus GPT-4. What that points to is if you have the giant resources that Google has and you're willing to move fast, leverage DeepMind, leverage the best AI minds at Google, slam them together and say, hey, here's our objective, go. I think they will be able to close that gap. They have a huge incentive here, right? Which is to defend their search business or be the one to disrupt it with their own large language model. And I think they're doing a good job of finally opening their eyes and realizing, hey, we have to compete here. And the competition moves fast, back to the earlier point. So we must move fast, even though we're a giant ship. What do you think?
I agree. I agree. I think one of the surprises of 2023 for me has been that Microsoft has maintained and arguably extended their lead in this area. I thought it was just a matter of time before like Google caught up. But funnily enough, it's the second demo in their recent history I can remember where they've messed up a demo and it's caused loads of embarrassing coverage, but also the stock has suffered as a result as well. It's not like they're short of smart people at Google who understand AI. They've got some of the biggest, best AI people in the world, and they're not short of cash to be able to throw at a problem like this. So I'm also hopeful that Google will do something. And ultimately, I think the consumer will win, really, because this arms race, if you want to call it that, with AI will just mean we will see more innovative products coming to market kind of quicker. To your earlier point, so I think it will be like the AI that we're experiencing this time next year will be a big step up from what we have currently. And I think, that's exciting for everyone. How do you think investors should think about this kind of going forward then?
So I think the big takeaway here for me, for sure, is that speed and volatility thing, right? Speed in the sense that news is going to come out way faster, more product launches, more service launches, more capabilities and things like ChatGPT and Bard, more use cases, more verticals, right? And as a result, we're going to see that speed result in things like the goofs that happen with Bard and then the goof that happened with Gemini. ChatGPT has no shortage of criticisms that it had during its initial rollout. And so that will, I think, increase the volatility of these stocks. we're going to see stocks suffer, and then someone's going to come along and fix a thing, and then the stock will rally, and then the next thing will break, and then it'll suffer, and it'll be this cycle of volatility that I think people are not really ready for. It's not macroeconomic volatility. It's actually technological progress volatility. And now understanding and assessing technical risk, understanding the science behind the stocks, which is our specialty here, like it's going to become more and more meaningful because more and more of the stock price, I think, will be driven by genuine advances in advanced technology. Let me follow up on that just based on what you just said. Do you still think that OpenAI has a big advantage over any other large language model of your choice, whether it's Anthropic with Claude, Google with Gemini? How much do you think that their head start has shrunk, or do you think it's not shrunk at all and it's just that there are other players in the field now? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'll share my journey, and I think this might be typical, right? I started with ChatGPT because that was the first thing that came out. Everyone used that. Then I learned that if you use Microsoft Search, if you use Bing, that was able to do a bit of generative AI plus bring in real-time search results. So then I started using like Bing chat. Then I learned that Anthropic's Claude could take a much bigger prompt than anyone else. So I was like, right, I can feed it an entire YouTube transcript and get it to summarize that, which I wasn't able to do in ChatGPT. So I was moving around, and then ChatGPT came out with a subscription version that did all of that and more stuff. So I've been kind of like moving around to which tool provides me the best capability. And it feels like that's been a bit of a moving target. And, there's new ones popping up all the time. So, it does feel like ChatGPT because now it can take a much bigger prompt and it's been brought up to date with knowledge from April 2023, and it's integrated with live search. Like that, for me right now, as of recording this, is the solution I always go to. But it's a really fast moving space. Something could come out in the next few weeks that beats it.
Yeah, for me, I think the competition is constantly raising the lowest acceptable amount of performance, but ChatGPT, specifically GPT-4, GPT-4 Turbo, GPT 4.5, seems to always be raising the ceiling, and then everyone is quickly closing that gap, right? So I do think that maybe right now Gemini is the frontier model, right? But in general, the distance between the frontier model and the baseline, whatever we're calling the rest of the competition's average, seems to be getting smaller and smaller, which seems to be pointing to by this time next year, or maybe 18 months from now or whatever, these large language models will be fully democratized, commoditized, however you want to think about it, to the point where the advantage won't be in which model is better. It's which model is more user-friendly, which model has the capabilities that are right for me, which models are the easiest to prompt engineer, which models are the easiest to extend with third-party integrations and plugins. I think we're going to move to a paradigm in the next 12 months where ahead means something different, not bigger, but more extendable.
I think that's a great way to think about it. That's what people really care about, not how many billion parameters you've just rolled out in your latest one. It's like, what can I do with it? Does that give me a competitive advantage if I'm using that versus something else? Totally agree. Totally agree. Great. So we've covered the software side of it. Now let's talk about the hardware, which has been equally as explosive. And from a stock market movement point of view, it's probably been even bigger. I mean, as of recording this podcast, nvidia has just crossed the $500 mark for the stock. Something insane. So yeah, nvidia and AI really has been the story of the year. So they had record data center earnings. And huge margins for a hardware company, incredible margins around their H100 chips. They've got H200 coming in the near future. The only thing limiting them seems to be the actual getting the H100s out quick enough. And that really seems to be more about TSMC's lack of capacity more than anything else. They've been pretty much uncontested in 2023. They've had it all their own way. So we've just had AMD have a launch of their MI300X. A few days ago, we had Intel's AI Everywhere event. How do you see the market? Is this a winner-takes-all market in terms of the GPU data center area? What are your thoughts?
I think this is not a winner-take-all market. And I think the big differentiator here is data centers are really portfolios of technologies, right? What actually happened was when it came to servicing a lot of these new workloads, one solution was absolutely superior to the rest simply because the rest didn't exist, right? Like the A100 was a virtually uncontested GPU. The H100 was a virtually uncontested GPU in a moment where GPUs didn't matter until they did, right? And then what happened was all these AI workloads, they only had one chip to turn to, right? So, and that, by the way, what I'm saying now actually started a few years ago when OpenAI worked with Microsoft to build out like AI Azure and start powering GPT and GPT-2, but it was sort of behind the scenes. Nobody was really talking about it, right? Large language models really need GPUs to take off. Who's the GPU maker? It's NVIDIA, right? Now that market exists, we have entrants like Intel's Gaudi 2 and soon Gaudi 3 chip. We have AMD's MI300X and MI300A. And now the question is this new AI-driven market a winner-take-all market? Because it used to be there's only one company that could do it. Now that multiple companies can do it, what happens, right?
Yep.
I still think the answer is no, because it's going to be who's the best? How can we get only the workloads that are most cost-effective to run on there? Because this is an expensive chip and its capacity is at a premium. And so the real question is, what workloads make the most sense on NVIDIA's GPUs, right? And then back calculate from there, what percentage of all data center workloads will that be? And that is how you decide like who's going to win this market, in my opinion. I do think that everyone is still sleeping on how big AI and generative AI workloads are going to be in the next 18 months.
And it's I love how starkly you put it. This wasn't a market. There was only one player in it, and we didn't have that killer app, if you like, for AI.
Yeah.
I remember when the GPU market collapsed, people were saying, well, NVIDIA was successful because of crypto mining and the GPU market, but its revenues are declining, which they were. They literally,
the PC GPUs, right?
They were literally, PC GPUs were like literally declining. Gaming had been their big thing. They had this AI play. We knew they were a leader in there, but there wasn't really a massive upsell. And then we had the ChatGPT moment, which really turned the whole thing on its head. Do you think AMD is too late? Some people feel like when the MI300X came out, it's come out like, they've already missed the boat.
I don't think so. I think it's behind. But there's two reasons why behind doesn't mean too late. First, it can do some of the things that the H100 can do very well, which means you can offload some of the workloads that you would directly put on the H100 onto the MI300, and you will probably get similar price performance, right? And if you can get away with less power at the cost of like longer run times because you don't care based on the workload, you'll use the cheaper chip. It's not like self-driving cars where one user tends to buy one car, so the winner becomes a winner-take-all market, because why would you not buy the best, cheapest car, in this case, Tesla? If a better chip comes along, they're not like deleting server racks. They're saying, okay, my next round of expansion, I'm going to buy more of these. I'm going to change my portfolio mix to be more like that. I'm going to move towards a new goal, as opposed to, sell my old car, buy a new car. I still own exactly one car, right?
One thing we should know about NVIDIA, if you, Alex, wanted to get an H100 tomorrow, apparently there's a 12-month lead time to get that. So if AMD can get you something that's not quite as good, but nearly as good in a shorter time period, you might opt for that if you want to buy a few of these and run your own business. So that is why I feel as well that AMD will take a piece of that pie in 2024. They don't have to be the fastest. They don't have to be the most power efficient or cheapest. They have a seat at the table, and they will take some share out of this market.
So if AMD just says, you're right, NVIDIA's chips are 50% better than ours. Ours are 50% cheaper. It's obviously not that simple because there's power considerations and physical data center footprint. There's a pricing strategy element to all this, not just a compute performance element, right? And then the other thing I want to just point out before we move on, which I think is like super interesting, how many emergency presentations have we seen this year where like even Apple got forced to make like all of a sudden after Qualcomm's presentation, an emergency scary fast event. And then after an NVIDIA presentation, we see an emergency AMD presentation and an emergency Intel presentation. I think that was bananas. That was not something that used to happen in the industry, right? Like, these events used to take months to plan, prepare for. People would rehearse their talks. They would nail the words. It's been pretty wild. And that's another function of all the speed, right? How fast things are.
Yeah, you're right. That's a
What
really good call. It sounds like a really a good recipe for some fun next year. So as we kind of wrap up the year, I think the last kind of area we wanted to cover is the channel itself. Looking back at the channel over the year, we've had some changes. We famously broke up with ARK Invest and we focused and really zoomed in on AI software companies, semiconductors. That was a key focus of the channel. We came out with different formats as well. The podcast that we're on right now, more supercuts of specific events. What do you really want the ticker symbol U audience and community to take away from this change in direction? And can you speak a little bit around the change in direction as well?
The breakup with ARK Invest wasn't like some pre-planned thing, right? What actually happened was me and you, Arif, decided to stick to our core competencies instead of go and mirror and comment on another portfolio manager. ARK Invest really does, in my opinion, have the best research. And also, in my opinion, they're not that great, let's just say, at turning that research into investment decisions. And we were very specific with what those investment decisions were, like dumping nvidia right before it tripled, or not recognizing the innovations coming out of the Magnificent Seven. There were a lot of these biases that showed up in their investment decisions, seemingly because they just wanted to stay uncorrelated with the larger indexes. But really that started affecting the way they're describing innovation overall, to the point where it didn't really jive with what me and you and our backgrounds were, right? So that's really what drove us away from ARK. And at the same time, I do want to stick to our core competencies. I think AI software and hardware, me and you together, do a really good job of covering that space. I do think that when ARK Invest overlaps in that space, especially for like ARK K, ARK W, and ARK Q, those three funds, I do want to cover their research more. I've always said this. I think they have some of the best research in the market space overall. I just don't necessarily agree personally with how they turn that research into investment decisions. And I think we've seen that this year when we broke up with ARK Invest. We crushed it this year, right? Like our biggest stock pick was NVIDIA. It more than tripled. Our second biggest stock pick was Microsoft. ARK Invest doesn't hold any Microsoft, and they dumped a lot of NVIDIA. So we diverged from them pretty hard. So, we'll keep doing more of that and aligning with them when it makes sense and not aligning with them when it doesn't. And whoever wants to follow that journey along the way can. And for people who don't like our takes on the market, there are plenty of other incredible content creators out there who have very different frameworks for investing. I think that's great.
We'd get a call and Alex would be like, we're going to change direction. We're like, what, again? But no, it made sense. To be fair, looking back, you were right. We doubled down on like AI, the AI area and chips. And the software side of it, and that has been the focus of the last 12 months. I mean, to give people something a behind the scenes view, I remember like me and you met in New Orleans, and I was jet lagged massively. So my evenings, by about 6 o'clock, I was passing out. But in the mornings, I was buzzing. So I was like buzzing. I just had my coffee. It was about 7, 8 o'clock. I was like, Alex, I've got this idea. Let's do this podcast. And I was so confident for whatever reason that would be a really good idea. I think it might have been the coffee talking. And you were like, yeah, let's do it. And then I remember about half an hour before we went live to record our first episode, that was when I started to doubt myself. You've got such an established audience as a single person talking to camera. I've been in the background up until now. So I wasn't sure how it would go. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone for the feedback that they've shared. The comments have been really helpful as well. It's not, they've been constructive as well about things you want to hear more of, things you want us to focus on. But we're going to keep doing this. And yeah, it's been a fun ride. And, we're only on the first few episodes. I'm sure we're going to come up with some really interesting content next year in this format as well.
Yeah, it's been great. And so there's one like contingent of the audience that I really do want to acknowledge. So we've pivoted pretty hard away from growth stocks towards stocks in areas that we have a lot of competence in and confidence in, frankly. And there are people out there who wish we covered more hidden gems, wish we covered smaller stocks with bigger growth opportunities. And I really do understand and appreciate that. I think now that interest rates are scheduled to fall in 2024 and 2025, you can expect a little more of that from us, but definitely in the areas that we already cover. AI companies, software as a service companies, semiconductor companies, augmented and virtual reality. I think as the channel has grown to nearly 300,000 subscribers, it matters more to me that people are getting good information than exciting information, right? And so some of that pivot has been us maturing as a channel and as content creators and as people who care more about adding value to the audience than feeling valuable. I think this year has really been, hey, what's best for the audience? How can we best serve the audience? What ideas really make sense for the audience? And that seemed to be focusing on the technologies that are really changing our lives at a breakneck pace, which is why all of our favorite moments, both on hardware, software, in the stock market, have been so focused on AI. And I think the channel did an outstanding job of really hyper focusing on that one thing, taking our research, turning it into investment decisions that we believe in. And as a result, that's what's responsible for the gains. If you look at the types of stocks and their performance in 2021 and even some of 2022, and then our performance post pivot, it's night and day, right? So I think, for those people who are looking for hidden gems, you'll find them. Like, we will cover them more in AI software and hardware. But our goal is always, I think, from really last year on, to think of the audience first and not what's cool and exciting just for the sake of being cool and exciting.
I think there was a point in time when everyone was looking for growth stocks because interest rates were so low and they were looking for the next big thing, and they were trying to really uncover these hidden gems. And it wasn't just them. It was VC companies were plowing millions into these companies to try and get a return on their money.
Billions.
It was a different time.
Billions.
It was a different time. And COVID just exacerbated that. And what is really interesting, what you were just talking about there in terms of ARK Invest and innovation. So one theme they're massive on is obviously AI being at the center of everything. So they should have really benefited from the last 12 months. Why didn't they? One is that they didn't believe that the mega caps were the place to get that benefit from AI. And I think they've been quite dogmatic about that, haven't they? Like you said, you're not going to get exposure to the traditional stocks, to the big things in the indexes. You're going to get something different. You're going to get innovation to the ARKs.
Yeah. And I do think, one thing that I found is true of all good investors is they're willing to change their minds with new data, right? Whether that's new interest rates, whether that's just new technologies coming out. If you're the same investor you were 10 years ago, you're probably not a good investor. And you might have a little bit of soul searching to do if you think what did well in 2020 and 2021 is the same thing that's going to do well in 2024 and 2025, let alone 2030 and 2031, right? The world is moving fast, as this whole podcast episode has hopefully pointed out in spades. Investors will need to learn how to move fast too. And so I'm looking forward to our next episode where we talk about our predictions for 2024. I'm sure that episode will come out in December, and by the end of January, it'll be all wrong. But the idea there is, are things moving too fast to even predict? So I'm really excited for that episode too. And with that, until next time, this is Ticker Symbol U. My name is Alex, and I'm joined by Arif, reminding you that the best investment you can make is in you.